Brought to you by my Patreons.
Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Fer, and in just a few weeks we are gonna get Phyrexia, All Will Be One. And as you can imagine, I am very excited to see what happens in the story. And I'm especially interested to see how they portray the Phyrexians. And not just the predators, but the everyday Phyrexians. I hope they are not portrayed as just like creepy monsters, but as characters. I hope that we can see that they have their own feelings and their own emotions, their own opinions, their own worldview. Because I think that when a story can make you feel that a faction, that a group of people is real, when you can understand how they think and why they do the things they do, even if you don't agree with them, that's when a story can be not just good, but great. Hello, I am Leo Rikes. I'm a Phyrexian here in New Phyrexia. I know I look very human, but that's because I was created to be a sleeper agent, to infiltrate Dominaria and bring it down from within. Sadly, the mission was completed before I could be deployed. My siblings were just too efficient and they didn't let me have any of the fun. And so I have never left New Phyrexia. But I am grateful for that. Because where else would I want to be in the multiverse than in New Phyrexia, the place that continues the work of great Yakmoth, the father of machines? Yakmoth was a being who achieved perfection, and he created Phyrexia, a perfect world. And from there, he strived to bring perfection to the entire multiverse that is inhabited by fleshly imperfect creatures who suffer because they don't know they can be perfect. But sadly, great Jagmoth was killed. He was killed by imperfect and ungrateful beings that called themselves the crew of the Weatherlight, a ship that we now control. Because you see, not even death can stop the great Yakmoth. Not even death can stop the great work. In his divine foresight, Yakmoth created the glistening oil, a sacred substance that can purify anything it touches, a substance that can replicate and complete entire worlds, bringing them to perfection. Let me tell you how that happened. It's one of my favorite stories. Long ago, Yakmoth created sleeping agents just like me, and one of them was called Xancha. Xancha went to Dominaria, but she was found out, and she was ruthlessly killed by the cursed Ursa. And then Ursa used Xancha's entrails to make his own creation, because Ursa wanted to be like Great Yakmoth. He wanted to be an artificer, but he could not match the mastery of Yakmoth. And so, at most, he could take his work and reassemble it into another form, which he called Karn. But such is the perfection of Yakmoth's work that Karn could not help but to follow in the footsteps of his father. And I don't mean the wretched Ursa, I mean Yakmoth, his real father. Karn went on to create Argentum, a world of machines. This world wasn't perfect, but it was the perfect breeding ground for the new generation of Phyrexians. Because unknown to Ursa and to Karn, there were some drops of glistening oil inside Xancha's heart, and it only took an imperceptible amount of it to leak from Karn into Argentum for the transformation to begin. Of course, the story of how Argentum was eventually saved is a long and torturous one, but what's important is that eventually we were led to victory by the five predators: Elish Norn, the mother of machines, Chinkitaxias, Vorinclex, Sheoldred, and Urabrask, who has now betrayed us. So sad. But the great work cannot be stopped, and it will find victory even without him. But now that the clever Jingitaxias has found a way to turn planeswalkers to our side, all the pieces are in place. Soon the great work will spread through the multiverse, and they can try to stop us. They can bring all the armies of the multiverse against us. It will make no difference. Soon everything will be perfected. And I'm so happy when I think of all of these fleshly creatures across the multiverse. Right now they are suffering because they don't know they can be perfected. But how happy will they be when they see us coming? How joyful will they be when the glistening oil starts changing their bodies? Soon all will be one. Kapah, shk, y mas ahak. And of course, the biggest question in the story right now is if the Phyrexians are going to win, if they are going to lose, or if something else is going to happen. One option is that the Phyrexians are not defeated, and that in 10 more years we are going to have another set about what happens with the Phyrexians. But I think that would be a very bad choice because, well, it feels that Wizards of the Coast is building up to something important, and it cannot amount to just that, to be continued. No, 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 it needs to be something that matters, right? And so I think that the Phyrexians will be defeated. But then you have a problem, because they clearly want to keep this faction around, maybe to be villains in the future, but they need to be defeated in a significant way so that it feels that it matters. And so we get to my wish, what I hope will happen in the story. And my wish is that when the Predators are defeated by the forces of Dominaria and the Gatewatch and Kaladesh and whomever else decides to help, that there will be Phyrexians fighting with the good guys. And you might think that this is impossible because Phyrexians seem to have this kind of brainwashing, but Warbrask wasn't brainwashed, and neither is Tesseret. It seems that they save this brainwashing for the really important targets, like the Planeswalkers. And so we can assume that most Phyrexians are not brainwashed, that they are obeying Elesh Norn out of devotion and loyalty or fear. And if you have any doubt that this is possible, let me remind you that Xancha rebelled against Yagmoth himself. So yeah, a Phyrexian rebellion is completely possible. We were, we were so close to victory. And now, we've lost everything. And the traitors dare say that we were wrong. They dare blemish the name of great Yakmoth and Elishnorn, and they say that they lied to us. They say that it was all false. They say that they weren't following perfection. They say so many things, it doesn't make any sense. And so when this alliance of multiple planes occupies New Phyrexia, there are millions of Phyrexians who fought on their side and millions of Phyrexians who did not. And there's a question of what to do with them. And here is my second wish. I hope that many of these Phyrexians will start to change their mind. One option would be for the Phyrexians to completely abandon their ideals about the great work and completion and perfection. And perhaps most of the Phyrexians who rebelled against Elishnorn and joined the Alliance did so for that reason, because they didn't believe in that ideology anymore. I've been talking with the invaders. Not that I have much of a choice. And they've been telling me about places around the multiverse. And I think we are not alone in the great work. They've been telling me of a place called Esper in Alara. And they've been telling me that they used this magnificent material called Ethereum to complete creatures there. And sure, they don't call it completion, but that's what it is. We were not the only ones working towards it. And I've seen some of the constructs they make in a place called Kaladesh, where we got the planar bridge from. And the things, these constructs are beautiful. They combine the designs of life with such advanced technology. I guess it shouldn't surprise me. After all, they created the planar bridge, something that we couldn't create ourselves, so we had to steal it. And there are many other places in the multiverse where they've been creating wonderful things. Come to think of it, Karn and Ursa, they were also creating, well, artifacts, and, well, Argentum, this world, it was already full of machines. Maybe it didn't need the glistening oil. I see all of these artificers and all of these peoples creating stuff all over the multiverse, and they might not call it that way, but I think they were working towards the great work, same as us, I think. But I think it would be a lot more compelling as a story if some Phyrexians found a way to save their ideology. Because here's the thing, the Phyrexian ideology is not unique in the world of magic, and it's also not that bad. Nature is wonderful. It creates amazing things, and we should learn from them. But also, nature can be imperfect. And one good example is this. Did you know that we have a nerve that goes from our brain, wraps around our heart, and then goes to control our mouths? And you may think that that's not a big deal, but then consider giraffes. They have the exact same design flaw, and that nerve goes all the way down the giraffe's neck, wraps around its heart, and then goes all the way back up to its mouth. That single nerve is like 10 meters long, and it shouldn't be. That's an example of how nature is not always as perfect, or at least as efficient as it could be. The Phyrexian ideology is that true perfection comes from intellect and nature, from technology and flesh. When they come together, they have different strengths and weaknesses, but they can complement each other and create something perfect. Or at least that's the goal. And if that sounds familiar to you, that's because it's not a new idea. I mean, it's the entire plot of Cyberpunk 2077. And there are so many science fiction franchises that have cool prosthetics. And in real life, there are many people who benefit from prosthetics that improve their bodies. And between you and I, like, if we ever create some really, really cool robot eyes, I would totally be down to getting some improvement here. And so the Phyrexian ideology is not necessarily bad. And this ideology is also not unique in the world of Magic the Gathering. In fact, you can find something very similar in Esper, except instead of calling it the Great Work, they call it the Noble Work. And okay, you may think that maybe many of these similarities are because these stories were written by the same writers, and that artifacts are a part of the game, so they had to recycle ideas of how to include artifacts in the stories. And yeah, that's probably the reason why it happens, but also you can reframe it and say that there's something about the world of Magic the Gathering that keeps compelling people across multiple planes of the multiverse to just, that draws them to the same ideas of uniting flesh and metal. And that's something really cool. Suddenly, from something that was merely practical, like including artifacts in the stories because they are part of the game, suddenly you can turn them into themes in the story. What are these themes that keep repeating in different places across the multiverse with different people? What are the similarities in their approaches? What are their differences? And why can they cooperate because of those similarities? Or will those differences put them in conflict? And in fact, in the case of the Phyrexians, the main problem with their ideology, the main reason they make so many enemies, is because they want to force their ideals onto everyone else. That's the problem. That's what makes Phyrexians bad. They didn't ask you if you want to become a cyborg. They turned you into a cyborg whether you want it or not. But suddenly, if you add to the Phyrexian ideology that consent is important because consent is important, suddenly it's not that bad anymore, is it? Like, if you choose to become a creepy machine cyborg, it's your choice. It's your body and it should be respected. Many people across the multiverse are part of the great work, and Yakmoth was just one of them. He had visions of perfection and he tried to follow them, but he corrupted those visions because in the end he didn't care about perfection. He only cared about control and power, same as Elish Norn. They only cared about controlling us, and perfection was just an excuse. They even made us believe we were the only ones striving to perfection, but we weren't. How can one individual even know the path to perfection? How can one individual even know the path of the great work? That's why it's called the great work, because it's the work of not just us Phyrexians, but everyone across the multiverse. And for that reason, it has to be a collaboration and it has to be voluntary. You cannot force someone to follow the great work because that forcing is imperfect. Perfection can only be voluntary. And Yakmot's ideas about the great work have the same origin as Karn's idea to create Argentum and even Ursa's ideas to create Karn. They all came from the machine god, the real machine god. This is a divine being that is somewhere in the multiverse, inspiring artificers. That's the reason there are so many other people following the great work, because we all hear the machine god whispering in our hearts, guiding us. And Jagmoth heard that voice, but he corrupted it. He confused his own voice with the voice of the machine god, and that's how he lost his path. Or maybe the machine god doesn't exist, but it will. Maybe that's the purpose of the great work, to create the machine god, a perfect being that will bring an end to suffering to all beings, be they made of steel or flesh or both. And then we will all be one. Kapashk imasaha. My brothers and sisters and siblings need to hear this. They need to know that, yes, we were misled, but there is a path for us. The great work is real. Perfection is achievable. The machine god whispers not only to us, but to everyone else. They need to know. And not just other Phyrexians, everyone across the multiverse should know. I need to tell them about the great work that we all form part of. And then we can start working together. And maybe one day we will bring the machine god into existence. And it will be benevolent. And it will be peaceful. And it will offer perfection to everyone who accepts it. And so it would be cool to see Phyrexian characters in the story trying to reconcile all of these things. Maybe they start learning about artificers in other planes, they start learning about this ethereum metal and stuff like that, and they start to realize that maybe they can cooperate with these people. Maybe Phyrexia is not all there is. Maybe the great work is even greater than Phyrexia. And there is this popular fan theory going around, which, I mean, it seems pretty much certain that the Phyrexians are going to use this tree that they stole from Kaladesh to create like this huge interplanar tree that connects the entire multiverse. And then it will be easy to travel across the multiverse even for creatures that are not planeswalkers. It would be really cool. In fact, I sort of imagine this Phyrexian character that is like an anthropologist, and he just goes through the multiverse, meeting all these different cultures, learning about them, writing about them, and he can just keep doing that. Just keep going through the multiverse, keep having adventures, keep meeting new people, and he can become like the opposite of so many Phyrexians. But I think that the best thing about this is that it allows the Phyrexians to be complex. They don't have to be creepy monsters that want to turn everyone into cyborgs. They are allowed to be creepy monsters if they want, but they are also allowed to be heroes. They are allowed to have friends. They are allowed to be explorers. They maybe in future sets we could find that someone goes to a plane and some small community of Phyrexians have made their home there, and they make artifacts for everyone in town, and they are part of the community. And maybe we could find that in some other place there's a group of Phyrexians and they are making trouble for some reason. They chose to be villains, but that's fine. It was their choice. And so Phyrexians suddenly not doesn't become a synonym for being evil. It just becomes another race in the multiverse, like Bedalkins and humans and Leonines and so many other stuff. Except they are so cool and they have their language, and Wizards of the Coast can keep using them, and we can keep having more cards in Phyrexian and more stuff in Phyrexian. That would be really cool. But yeah, I mean, to summarize, I want that to happen because I think that's the best way for the Phyrexians to be complex, to be allowed to be many things, and for us to have Phyrexian characters that are many things. We could have heroes, we could have villains, we could have friends and enemies, we could have everything. And so yeah, I think that would be the best option. And so yeah, those are my wishes for the future of the Magic story regarding the Phyrexians. I hope that will happen, and if that doesn't happen, I hope that whatever we get is earned. I hope that it's really cool. I hope that it's satisfying, and I hope that we get a lot more of the Phyrexian language. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and just a quick announcement. In December, I'm gonna be from the 16th to the 18th in the event in Mexico City. I'm gonna take my Commander deck. It's the first deck I have ever bought from Magic. I've never bought a deck before. And so I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna be playing, I'm gonna have a t-shirt written in Phyrexian. And so yeah, look for me if you're gonna be there, that's gonna be great. And so yeah, thanks for watching and goodbye.
But before we go, I want to give special thanks to Ottimo Tiosum, Valerie Hyde, T. Highfield, Ryan Roberts, Carol Facioli, and Cookie Sub T. All my patrons, thanks 1,000 times, thanks a million times, and happy holidays.